I went about midnight, and as I'm walking up his driveway, I noticed the coyotes all around are extremely vocal. I mean, they're loud, they're high-pitched, but they sound nervous. As I'm walking in the back, I could hear something moving around, and I heard these soft growls at first, but they were very, very deep growls. But as I'm moving, the security lights kick on. And when those lights came on, the first thing I noticed was a light reflecting off of this thing's eyes, brightly glowing like amber, staring right at me. And that's when my eyes adjusted and I could see this wasn't a bear. This wasn't a mountain lion. This thing looked like a hyena. And it's just kind of staring at me for a minute. And I can see its head moving side to side like a curious dog would do. All of a sudden, it rushes forward maybe about 4 or 5 feet and stops on a dime.
This is Bigfoot Crossroads. I'm Matt, and joining me is a very special guest who we have been trying to align our schedules for a month now, it seems. Mr. Ryan Tremblay, how are you?
I'm doing fairly well, man. I'm very tired. It's been a busy time for me, but I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. We were just chatting. You just attended the Georgia Bigfoot Conference as a speaker.
I did. Yeah.
Wow, man. Crazy.
Yeah, I got to get used to that whole large crowd speaking thing, but I'll wiggle into it eventually. I'll get used to it somehow.
Yeah. So your presentation was over the Wendigo?
Yes, that's one of my specialties. The Wendigo, the Yinararushi, basically Native American aspects on Bigfoot and things like that.
Would you care to jump right into some conversation about the Wendigo?
Oh, absolutely. I am always doing for that, sir.
If you haven't talked yourself out already.
Oh, no. I can never talk enough about the Wendigo.
You're the resident expert on the subject, so I'm, just going to default to you. But the Wendigo is one of my pet peeves.
Uh-oh.
Whenever it comes to Bigfoot and cryptozoology in general.
You know what? You and I are along the same lines because I keep telling everybody the Wendigo absolutely does not qualify as a cryptid.
Thank you.
And the reason why that is by definition alone, a cryptid is an animal, okay? So possibly Bigfoot. I'm not saying Bigfoot's an animal, but possibly Bigfoot, or maybe Dogman or Nessie. Those would be animals, okay? We haven't proven their existence yet. They haven't been verified. Thus, they're a cryptid. The Wendigo, though, no. It's an entity. It's a spirit. So in no way is that a cryptid.
Yeah, I recently made a post about this. Just kind of in, maybe I'm just getting a little older. and certain things are starting to bug me. And one of those things is the newfound modern folklore, pop culture, cryptozoology, where you're throwing in Wendigo, Skinwalker, Fresno Nightcrawlers. Just everything is getting lumped into cryptozoology along with Bigfoot, which is a subject I take very seriously, obviously.
Oh, me too. And that's actually part of the reason why I started doing the whole Wendigo studies, because I felt like the internet and social media itself wasn't doing a proper job of relaying the Algonquin traditions of the Wendigo. It wasn't giving the true definition. So I kind of felt like somebody had to step up to the plate. And that somebody was me. So that's what I'm trying to do with both Wendigo and Skinwalkers, is trying to show people this isn't how they were interpreted by the different tribes.
So let me ask you this. Why did you pick that specific topic to go after?
Well, I could go with the tough guy response and say, "Oh, I didn't choose the Wendigo chose me."
Sure.
But no, like I was saying, I saw all these YouTube videos everywhere, and I've seen like different, drawings and paintings on Instagram and TikTok where they were always inaccurately portraying the Wendigo and the Skinwalker. And I was like, well, somebody has to relay what they were really like. And, that might as well be me. So I might as well do this research and get, the actual facts from the different indigenous people and relay it back to social media so they actually know what's going on and what it really is. And, honestly, I found myself fascinated by both the Wendigo and the Skinwalker, and it's one of those things that I just have to get it all out there for everybody.
The Wendigo internet version is basically a kind of a really tall, lanky humanoid with like a deer skull for a head.
Yeah, and sometimes it has like a very weird shaped body with fur and a tail and super long claws and glowing red eyes, and yeah, not accurate at all.
So what is the actual Wendigo according to folklore and native tradition?
Well, according to the Algonquin lore, it's a human that gets overtaken by this entity. And what happens when they transform, they become a very pale-skinned, emaciated being that's void of hair. And they really take on a more corpse-like appearance. And if anybody out there has ever played Until Dawn, that right there is the most accurate representation of a Wendigo, period. What you see at the end of that game when they show the tall, lanky, very skinny, bald creature with, bloody mouth and bloody fingertips, that right there is how the Algonquin, the Cree, and the Ojibwe saw the Wendigo.
And it was more or less, to my understanding, a tell warning against cannibalism.
In some parts, yes. And I think it's become that because to most people, the most popular method of becoming the Wendigo is cannibalism. But all three of the tribes, the Algonquin, the Cree, and the Ojibwe, there's other means of becoming a Wendigo, though. One of them is you could be cursed by a shaman. So say you did some wrong to a shaman in a tribe, and he or she wanted to get back at you. They could put this curse of the Wendigo upon you, and you would eventually transform into a Wendigo. Now, another way is actually through your nightmares. Because in the tribes, the nightmares are kind of like passageways to another world.
Right.
And it works both ways. You can go into the spirit world, and the spirit world can come into you. So if you had nightmares or dreams about the Wendigo, it could influence you through your dreams and your nightmares.
So it was not only something that a person might unfortunately transform into, but something that could possess you as well, like a spiritual being.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess in today's religious terms, we'd call it a demon,
right? Which
I'm not really in full support of that term because it doesn't seem like it's exclusively demon-like. I think it's more of a winter spirit. So, but it's something that's so feared that these tribes won't even say the name Wendigo, because they feel that if you acknowledge it, you're giving it power. And because of that, it's going to seek you out.
That seems to be the case in a lot of folklore. Don't talk about it or it will happen.
Right. Well, I think it's because, words have power.
Right.
You can hurt somebody irreparably so with your words. So I think they believe that if you acknowledge these things and you spoke their names, you were giving them that attention.
Let's hop on over to the Skinwalker, which you've already mentioned several times. Again, not a cryptid, folks.
No.
I don't know what the deal is. I don't know how it ended up in the cryptid world.
I kind of have an idea on that. If you pay attention to a lot of the groups on Facebook, as I'm sure you're a part of, they compare the Skinwalkers, the Yi-Nararushi, to another popular cryptid here, the dogman. They think that dogman and Yi-Nararushi, the Skinwalkers, are one and the same. But through my research and talking to actual Navajo people here in Arizona, they're wrong on that. That's not the case. So when somebody becomes a Yi-Nararushi, they have to kill certain animals, and mainly it's like coyotes, bears, predatory animals. In the Dene, the Navajo culture, predatory animals are very sacred. So for a Yi-Nararushi to don the pelt of a predatory animal, it's kind of like spitting on the Bible. It's not something they should do.
Right.
And when they become the animal, they literally become the animal. The name Yi-Nararushi, translated into English, roughly means by means of it, on all fours he goes. And there's your key thing to focus on all fours he goes.
Right.
It doesn't say 2 legs, so they become the actual animal. So when a skinwalker becomes, say, a wolf, for example, because that's what most people compare dogman to, when it becomes a wolf, it becomes the actual wolf. And the only way you would know that was a skinwalker was, A, if you caught it and you caged it, it would transform back into its human form, or B, you look at the eyes, because in their animal form, the Yinalushi have very strange human-like eyes in their animal form.
Coming from Oklahoma, we don't have a lot of Navajo here, but we still do have, hushed talks of skinwalkers and things like that. There was a very famous crime that took place here called the Girl Scout murders, where a lot of people believe that the killer was in fact a skinwalker. And again, it's something that we've been taught, don't talk about them. And do you think that has played a part in skinwalker and Wendigo and things like that also working their ways into the cryptid world because it's not spoken about? So maybe a lot of times people aren't actually getting true information about them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And that's why I feel like I have to do this research, do the legwork, and then relay it to other people, so that they know the factual stuff. So when they see something out in the wild, they're not going to be like, oh, that was a Wendigo. Oh, that was a skinwalker. They can actually use that critical thinking that we need in this field and kind of think, well, it doesn't line up with what the Navajo say. So it's not a skinwalker, it's something else. And I think that's really important for us to do, because I don't think people realize that when we say everything's a skinwalker or everything's a Wendigo, we're kind of disrespecting the spiritual belief of the indigenous people.
Right.
And that's not really proper for us to do. So I've jumped down these rabbit holes, Matt. I mean, I've gone so far, even tying that rope around my waist doesn't do too much good because I'm tugging for somebody to pull me out and I'm not getting pulled out. So, but it's been fascinating though. I mean, I've spoken to people here in Arizona about these skinwalkers, and they've opened up to me in ways that I never thought they would. So for me to be a Caucasian guy and they're opening up to me and coming to me and telling me, this is what they're like, this is what they do, or coming to me with encounters, that's a very big honor for me, and I'm very proud of it.
That's something that really fascinates me, is that skinwalkers are still like an active part of tribal society in modern times.
Oh, absolutely.
What are some of the things that you've heard since you've gone down that rabbit hole?
Well, I've been told to talk respectfully about them. Don't ever take their name and, use it in vain. Mm-hmm. Don't be insulting or, degrading to them, because when you do that, it angers them. They can hear you no matter where they are. And when you anger them, that's when you incur their wrath. That's when they're going to come looking for you. And there's areas too where they've told me, don't go there because there might be one there and you're not strong enough to fight it if it comes after you. So, it's a fascinating topic, Matt. It really is.
Have you encountered anything negative since you've started researching this stuff? Like, has a skinwalker come after you, or have you ever felt like, maybe here's an area I need to back out of?
Oh, I've definitely had areas that I've gone to, and the minute I stepped foot on them, I just got this really sickening feeling in my stomach. And it was the weirdest thing. I mean, it's happened not too long ago. A buddy of mine were going out there, and we were fine. We were laughing and joking all the way up. And when we got to this spot, Matt, like, we both felt really dizzy. We were having a hard time breathing, and we felt like we were just, totally nauseated. And so I, decided, let's get out of here because this has to be bad juju. And sure enough, when we stepped off that property, boom, we were feeling better again. So I think there was some kind of power there that's going, yeah, no, I don't want you here. And I'm going to make you feel my presence. So catch wise and leave.
Where do you think that comes from? Do you think that's an external force or an internal force?
I think it could be both. I really think it could be both. I think that in the case of something like a skinwalker, it can influence the land that it lives on. So it can affect your atmosphere, your environment. So if it doesn't want you there, it can really bear down on you and make you feel a certain way.
So I have been dying to ask you about this, which I'm sure you've talked about it 1,000 times, but that's what we're here for. You are someone who has encountered something.
The dog.
Yeah, the dogman.
Mm-hmm.
An area that bothers me tremendously.
Uh-oh.
So I want to hear your story straight from the horse's mouth, because you have said, I've seen where you said a hyena-like animal.
Mm-hmm.
And that really caught my attention. So if you don't mind, walk us through your experience.
Okay. So a friend of mine and his wife, who lived in the town that I was living at the time, they were going on a vacation. And so they asked me to house sit for them. Okay. And, being that good buddy, I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So I had the schedule where I would check in the morning. I'd go in the afternoon. And then my last visit would be about maybe midnight, a little later. Okay, so on this particular night, it was in October, I believe. I went about midnight, and as I'm walking up his driveway, I noticed the coyotes all around are extremely vocal. I mean, they're loud, they're high-pitched, but they sound nervous, okay? And that was a little off-putting. That wasn't normal. That wasn't the usual. But I kind of dismissed it, just kind of fluffed it off. And as I'm walking in the back, I could hear something moving around, and I heard these soft growls at first, but they were very, very deep growls. And I thought maybe, hey, somebody's messing around with his property in the back. Maybe it's a homeless guy, or, hey, maybe it's stray dogs or whatever. So being only 5'10" and a half, I puffed up like that pufferfish. I got my chest sticking out and I'm all, hey, trying to scare off whoever or whatever it was. At first, there was no response, but then I started hearing noises again. So again, back into pufferfish mode. And I ball up and I'm all, hey! This time, I get answered with this very deep growl, Matt, that I could feel in my chest. I mean, when this thing growled, it was like it was right on top of me, just like rattling my rib cage. So I'm kind of going, oh crap, is this a bear? Is it a mountain lion? But logic in my head kicked in and said, oh, there's no bears in this town. So I proceeded to go in the back, and as I'm walking into his backyard, I can kind of see something in the silhouette. You know how when you're looking at shadows, you can see a deeper shadow moving?
Sure.
Okay, so it was like that. And, at first I thought maybe it was a homeless guy, okay? And I wasn't too scared of that. But as I'm moving, the security lights kick on. And when those lights came on, the first thing I noticed was a light reflecting off of this thing's eyes. And, they were like two big round balls, just brightly glowing like amber, staring right at me. And that's when my eyes adjusted and I could see this wasn't a bear. This wasn't a mountain lion. This thing looked like a hyena. Okay. And I see it. It sees me. And it's just kind of staring at me for a minute. And I can see its head moving side to side like a curious dog would do. And I'm rooted in place, Matt. I'm not moving. I don't know what this is. And I'm like, just standing there. This thing's staring at me. And all of a sudden, it rushes forward, maybe about 4 or 5 feet, and stops on a dime. And it did not take its eyes off me. It's just staring at me as it does this bluff charge. Then it slowly starts to lurch up. And as it lurches up, I hear a loud pop. And I see its arm go up and it grabs a branch. So it's holding onto this branch, just staring at me. I'm looking at it. I'm not daring to move. I'm not trying to pull out my phone or anything, because I know, thanks to my brothers who are hunters, if you run, you're going to trigger the predator-prey response. It's going to chase you. If you move too fast, it's going to attack. So I just stand there staring at it, and it's staring at me. And I don't know how much time passed, but eventually this thing starts to turn away. And it kind of looks at me over its shoulder as it's walking away. But once it's out of sight, Matt, that was it. I'm out. I ran up my friend's stairs into his house. I'm locking his doors. I'm bolting his windows. I'm opening his kitchen drawers looking for a knife. I even called my buddy up going, hey, man, is there something you didn't tell me? There's a hyena in your backyard. And that's when my friend thought I was crazy. He's going, Ryan, there's no hyenas in Arizona, bro. What are you talking about? And, I'm getting mad at him at this point, Matt. I'm going, no, you're crazy. You're lying, because I just saw a hyena in your backyard. This thing stood up, man. This thing stood up and it charged at me. And my friend, again, trying to be my voice of logic, he's going, Ryan, hyenas don't exist in Arizona, and hyenas don't stand up. So he came home with his wife, and I showed him where I saw this, Matt. You could see the scuff marks where the thing's claws were dragging in the sand.
Dude.
So my thing with that movie is like, okay, that's not done by you. So you did see something. And I'm going, that's what I told you. You know, and so, yeah, I saw this hyena-like thing. Now, is it a dogman? I don't know. Was it hyena-like? Absolutely. 100%. I mean, could it be something else, like a prehistoric creature that survived somehow? Maybe. But I don't know what it was. I really don't.
How long ago was this?
About 2 years now.
Okay. And whenever you say it looked like a hyena, are you talking about exactly like a hyena or just the shape of a hyena?
The shape of the face. Like if you imagine a hyena's face, that's how this thing's face looked. The snout was very short. It had the darker fur around the snout. It had the almost like the sloping forehead, had the rounded ears, and even the coloring, from what I could see in the lighting, was hyena-like. It was like that tawny caramel color with the little rosettes on the shoulders.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the only thing I can really, you know, compare it to is a hyena.
Right. Could you tell if it had human-like appendages or did it have paws?
The fingers were more, I like to say raccoon-like. They weren't really long like a human being. They were more, you know, stubbish like a raccoon's would be.
Yeah.
You know, and did it have a tail? I don't know, because I mean, the minute it turned its back, I was out of there. So, but it wasn't muscular. Like, you know how you hear those reports of like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, like dogman?
Yeah.
The one I saw, it wasn't like that. I would have to compare it to a basketball player. Like it had muscle, but it was that lean muscle.
How tall was it whenever it was standing upright?
I would say about 6.5 feet tall. So it was bigger than me. You know, I mean, it was taller than I was and had more muscle than I do. So I would have been easy pickings for this thing.
I've heard other reports, other encounters people have had with something that they describe as it looked like a hyena. That's especially in this part of the country, in the Ozarks. I mean, you have the Ozark Howler, which, you know, whatever. But I've heard from people that I know personally who have had encounters with something that they say, yeah, it's like a hyena. But I have never heard anybody say, and it stood up on 2 legs. This is a first for me. That's interesting.
When it stood up like that, Matt, I think my mind did flips. I think my brain started doing cartwheels because I had no idea what I was looking at. And I'm like, what?
So it's on all fours, and then it stands upright. Its neck and head position just fluidly changed perfectly and everything. It didn't seem to have any trouble with that.
In a way it did. It kind of looked like it had like a little hiccup or a stutter as it was, you know, standing up on 2 legs. Okay. Like it had to kind of position its neck and shoulders so its head could go down.
Yeah.
You know, because maybe that's what the popping was.
And it had shoulders like a human?
Yeah, but they were more narrow shoulders. They weren't broad. They were more sloping kind of shoulders.
I mean, you're in this world just like I am. So, I mean, I know you've heard dogman reports and all this stuff. So, like, now that you've had a couple of years to process it, I mean, do you think that's a dogman? Is that what people are seeing? Or did you see something else?
People have seen the same thing that I have. You know, I mean, I've spoken to other people that have seen the hyena type. So I kind of have to accept that it was a dogman. You know, I want to have that more scientific explanation, like maybe it was a prehistoric hyena or whatever. But even scientifically, that wouldn't make sense because they're extinct. So I have to accept that, yeah, it was a dogman.
And you're a skeptical thinker. You're a critical thinker.
I am, yes.
As I am. And so, dogman, I mean, what's going on with that?
You know, I wish I knew. I wish I knew, Matt. I mean, just when we think that we're getting close to answers, the questions change.
Yeah. Roddy Piper.
Yeah. We've yet to find a body. You know, we don't really have that many footprints. You know, we have a few, but not that many. We don't have fur. We don't have a corpse. You know, so I have to wonder, are these things interdimensional in some way? You know, is there an overlap? I don't know. I'm not sure we'll ever know.
Well, now you've brought up an interesting subject, the interdimensional, paranormal, spiritual aspect of cryptids, especially in the Bigfoot field as of recent in my timeline of things. What do you think about Bigfoot? Are we dealing with something that's flesh and blood, or is it possibly something more than that?
Oh boy, that's a complicated answer. So bear with me. I think they're both A, flesh and blood, and B, interdimensional. I think there's kind of like I don't want to use tulpa, but I think I will use that word. There's a tulpa effect going on here. I think people are thinking so much about Bigfoot that we're manifesting something that takes on the form of what we would call a Bigfoot. Are we all seeing the actual Bigfoot? I don't believe so. I think some people do see the flesh and blood ones, and that's why, we get the tracks, we get the fur. But I think other people are seeing these more tulpa-like beings, and that's why we get the cloaking, we get the disappearing, we get the mind speak, we get the bulletproof Bigfoot. So I think there's more than one thing at play here. I really, really do.
That's a really interesting theory. I'm not sure I've heard that one before.
Well, the spiritual Bigfoot, it's really not a new thing. A lot of the indigenous tribes do believe that Bigfoot is spiritual, that he comes over from a different realm and he teaches us different things. So it's not really a new concept. It's just a concept that's been pushed to the background.
Do you think cryptids in general all kind of fall into that category? Or do you think that there are some actual undiscovered animals left?
Oh, I definitely feel that there's some undiscovered animals out there, 100%. Are they going to be something fantastic like Bigfoot or Dogman? No, they're going to be something small like a woodpecker or Tasmanian tiger, something along those lines.
Sure. We discover those yearly.
Right. So, I think people kind of get lost in what a cryptid means. And I think they always think that when you say you're a cryptozoologist, that you're only chasing Bigfoot or Dogman. But no, it could be something like a woodpecker. I think there's animals out there that we've yet to discover. Absolutely.
So what got you interested in all this sort of stuff?
Well, I was a monster kid. Growing up, monsters were part of my daily diet. My dad was a monster fan. He was a Cajun guy. So he loved werewolves and everything like that. And, he was sharing those movies and things with me. So growing up, I would hear about the Wolfman, and we'd watch monster movies together, Godzilla, Gamera, Ultraman, the Universal monsters, the Hammer movie films. So it was just kind of like par for the course that as I was starting to get a little older, I would start realizing cryptids. And my dad showed me the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I think that was my dad's mistake, because when he did that, I was so hooked into Bigfoot. That was it. I had to have these answers of these monsters in the woods.
Yeah.
And he started telling me stories of the Rougarou, because, of course, being a Cajun guy,
sure,
he heard stories of the Rougarou growing up. So it's his thing to hand it down to his son. So I had Bigfoot, but now I had the Rougarou, and then, Nessie and Mokele Membe and all these things. So for a monster kid, that's the perfect world, because you're going, oh, so the monsters aren't just on TV. There's monsters outside. Yes.
I had that same reaction.
Right.
I grew up loving horror movies and stuff like that, but I was also always interested in the paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
Having experienced quite a bit of paranormal stuff growing up as a kid, which I'm not sure.
Oh.
Now that I'm older, was it more related to me being a child, or was it more related to the house or the environment? It's hard to say, but that eventually led me to the path of, Bigfoot and holy crap, there are actual monsters out there.
Isn't it how one path always leads to the other things?
Yeah. It's so weird.
Yep. If you start out with cryptozoology, sooner or later you get wrapped up in the paranormal. Or if you go with paranormal first, sooner or later you get into cryptids as well. It's kind of like, it's a forked road, but it all leads back.
Yeah, it all starts overlapping eventually.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And you're in Arizona, which is, a mecca for weirdness and strangeness and just everything.
Oh yeah, we get UFO sightings. We have ghostly encounters. We get the skinwalker stuff going on here. So
why do you think it is that way? Is it an environmental thing? Is it because of the history of civilization there? Why is not just Arizona, but the Four Corners region especially, such a hot spot for this sort of thing?
I think it's the history. And I think, obviously, because like the area is just like, it's so majestic. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And it's got just a history all of its own. And I think these things just, they stay here. And, the more we believe in them, I think that belief gives power. Okay. I know that sounds hokey, but I'm sure some of my paranormal people out there will support that. The more you believe in something, the stronger it gets. And I think that power just grows and grows and grows for, my area, your area, wherever you're at. That's honestly what I believe.
The hyena dogman creature that you saw, you mentioned that it was at your friend's house in his backyard. I mean, was this like in a town or was it out somewhere?
It's in a town, but the town that we lived in, it was a kind of like on the outskirts of Tucson. It was 60 miles away from Tucson, Arizona, and it was a small mining town. Okay, so there's plenty of abandoned mines, there's caves, there's railroad ways and everything. So, something existing in a place like that, it's not really unheard of. There's plenty of places to hide. I thought it was unusual too until I started really, looking at the area. Because when something like that happens to you, Matt, you really do start looking at the landscape. And, in doing so, I started seeing that, there's adequate water supply, there was adequate prey. Because we had quail, we had jackrabbit, we had these deer that would pass through. So we had plenty of stuff that something like this could live off of if it chose to hide there.
The reason I ask is because here in Oklahoma, you have a lot of smaller communities, mm-hmm. especially certain areas have these small Native American communities.
Right.
Where it's not that uncommon to hear stories of like Bigfoot coming in and raiding trash cans and things at night. Mm-hmm. But whenever it comes to the dogman topic, it seems like there aren't really any rules. Whenever you think about Bigfoot, you definitely think about areas like the Pacific Northwest and, they're out in the woods and they travel to maybe the outskirts of a town where, those areas overlap. But with dogman, you hear stories about them being right in the middle of town, right in the middle of cities.
Yep. I think the dogmen aren't afraid. I think Bigfoot has its own rules that it operates by, whereas dogman just takes those rules and throws it out the window.
It's just kind of scary to think about that. Like, okay, so I've never seen a dogman.
Not yet.
I grew up with, like I said, being into horror movies and stuff, but werewolves were always the monster that was like, oh man, that's the scariest one.
Oh yeah.
And so now you have dogman and it's like, oh wait, that's pretty much a werewolf. I don't know about the shape-shifting part of it, but I mean, that's a werewolf by description.
Yeah, by description, yeah. I think that the two are different, but description-wise, you're absolutely right.
And just the idea, like where I live, specifically in Tulsa, it's a city, and I've heard several stories of people in Tulsa seeing dogman, which is just crazy to me because this isn't an area where you have lots of wilderness surrounding the city. It's a metropolitan area. It's surrounded by other little towns and cities.
Well, that kind of leads to the whole interdimensional theory, don't you think? Because these guys can pop in and pop out.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't believe that, dogman should be considered a cryptid because I don't think they're just animals. I think if they're interdimensional, there's something more to them. So I'm very reluctant to put them in the cryptid category.
There's a thing referred to by the Creek tribe, I believe, here called the Nalusafalea, the long evil beings that were described as dog killers. They would come in and kill dogs at night and things like that. And that has kind of carried a moniker of a dogman with it. Have you ran across in your folklore studies anything native that sounds like a dogman?
There's a lot of things that get misinterpreted as a dogman. You have like the Wahida, the Shunkawarakan, mm-hmm. and a lot of people will add that, oh, this is a dogman because they describe it as attacking people and it's supposed to be canine-like. But what they're not reading, though, is all these things walk on fours, So it's not a dog man, really. It's a canine-like creature. But, is it possible that these canine-like creatures have evolved somehow to walk bipedally? I mean, possibly, but I do think there's a lot of misinterpretation.
The Shunkawarakan is another one that is known as a dog killer.
Yes.
Which also, for a while there was like a taxidermied thing floating around in Wyoming, I think, or
Yep.
Montana possibly, where they believe that was a Shunkawarakan. I mean, do you think it's possible that that is an actual creature that maybe at one time existed?
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. In fact, I have to wonder if the Shunkawarakan was a bear dog. And this thing wasn't either a bear or a dog, but it had resemblances to both. I got to wonder if maybe, there was a small pocket of that animal that existed up in the Honey Valley. That's where a lot of the stories of Shunkawarakan come from. So is it possible that, they existed up there and they were killing off miners and whatnot? Absolutely.
Have you had experiences with the paranormal or UFOs or anything?
I've had some ghostly encounters, and it's weird stuff that my friend and I still kind of trip out when we talk about. But when we were doing research one day, I was out by myself the first time this happened. I was walking around in the middle of the desert and it was dark out. It was very, very dark. I had my lights going and everything. I hear kids laughing in the background, in the distance. And I'm looking around with my flashlight. There's no kids around that. And it sounded like a group of kids, like a large group of kids. And as I'm scanning the horizon with my light, it sounds like these kids are running towards me. Like I can hear their footfalls. I can hear the pebbles being kicked. I can hear the sand moving. And I whipped around because I thought the kids were getting close. There was nothing there. And it sounded like the laughter moved off.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, kids in the night, that's creepy to hear. Okay. When you hear kids laughter and you're by yourself and you hear that, you're like, okay, I'm out of here. So yeah, I did leave. I left. I told my friend, this is what happened. He thought I was crazy. Okay. He's like, oh, no, you just heard kids playing. And I'm going, dude, I was in the middle of the desert at night. There's no kids playing in the middle of the desert at night. These sounded like they were 4 or 5 years old, so he comes out with me the following weekend. And we're out there about the same time, almost at the same exact area. We both hear that kid laughter again. We hear this group laughter, and it sounds like these kids are bum rushing us, like running right towards us. And he heard it too. He turned a pale white man. He was so scared from this, he turned a pale white. His jaw dropped, and he just stood there, staring at the emptiness that's around us. And I'm looking around to see if I could see any kids. Once again, it sounds like the kids' laughter just kind of like dissipated with the wind. And that was just so creepy. It happened twice. It was like, what is this?
Why do you think things like this seem to happen to people? And what I mean by that, someone who has paranormal experiences, also has cryptid experiences, also sees UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like some people are just sort of magnets for this type of stuff. Why do you think that is?
Well, one man's opinion. I think that, like you can be a skeptic or you can be a critical thinker like we are. And once you experience one or the other, be it a UFO sighting, a ghostly encounter, or a cryptid encounter, it opens your mind up, okay? And I think as far as the paranormal goes, the paranormal is very aware when your mind is open. And it's going to show itself to those who have that willingness to see. Because I think, with the paranormal, I think a lot of times it's spirits or energy wanting to be seen or felt. So when we have an open mind, they're aware of this. And this is why we get the ghostly encounters. This is why we get the cryptid encounters, because our minds are finally open. We're willing to see what we weren't willing to see before.
So is there a cryptid or anything in the realm of unexplained that particularly frightens you?
Oh, I can definitely say the Wendigo. I mean, it's not a cryptid, but the Wendigo and the skinwalkers, they terrify me. And that's why I'm like, I'm punishing myself by researching them. I think I'm sadistic in a way because, I'm like, oh, I'm terrified of it, but I got to research it. But yeah, I am afraid of those. And it's funny, Matt, because I once was very skeptical about both of these topics. Okay. There was a point in time that if you said, oh, Ryan, a Wendigo is real, I'd be like, no, it's not. But it's reached the point where I've done so much research and looked into it so much. I'm going, yeah, I believe you. I think the Wendigo is real. Yeah.
Have you found specific cases of the Wendigo?
Yeah, I have. It's actually one of the most popular cases. The Cree fur trader by the name of Swift Runner. In the winter of 1878, this guy actually killed and cannibalized his family. And, a little backstory for this to make it a little bit more intriguing for your listeners, Matt. A couple of weeks before he went out on this annual route that he would go upon, and he's been on this route plenty of times, so he knew what he was doing. He was having nightmares about the Wendigo. And he told one of his friends, and his friend kind of dismissed it. And what happened is just a few weeks after that, even though he laughed at Swift Runner and said it's not serious, Swift Runner left with his family only to cannibalize them. And he did, in fact, Swift Runner himself confessed to the magistrates and to the French monks that were there. I killed my son by doing this. I killed my wife by doing this. He even gave grisly details about how he killed his infant child. He talked about how he hung his infant from a pole. He had a noose around its neck, and he would pull on the baby's feet just to torture it, to make it gag and choke, and while he just let it dangle and die. And he told in detail how he cracked open the skulls to get to the brains, how he cracked open the femurs to suck out the marrow from the bones, how he boiled their bodies to eat them.
Wow. I had never heard a specific case of Wendigo.
Well, what makes it even more intriguing, Matt, is when you look at Swift Runner's backstory. Now, there's two different stories you'll get. Some people will say that when he was drunk, he was very aggressive, but I mean, that's not unusual. When somebody gets drunk, they usually tend to be kind of aggressive.
Right.
But there's another story where they said that he was a gentle giant, that he was a very, caring person. He was a very loving father, a devoted husband. He would never harm anybody. So for him to go from this kind person to cannibalizing his whole family, something happened there.
I don't know why, but Amityville pops to mind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's similar, sure.
Just the situation where you have a family man that just kind of snaps like that.
Yeah, and what made his story so disturbing, though, Matt, when he was showing the magistrates the crime scene, they actually did see smears of blood along the cabin walls. Outside, they saw little ash pits where he had cooked his family. And very nonchalantly, he would walk over to the skulls. He would stick two fingers into the eye sockets, hold it up and kind of waggle it at the magistrates and say, "Oh, this was my wife." And he just toss it aside, grab another one, and go, "Oh, this was my son." And he would show the cracked open skull, and he would tell them, "I cracked it open to get his brains."
Just matter of factly, no big deal.
Yeah, he was like he was just having a normal conversation with you, like he was asking you how you doing, And when they arrested him, what's even more disturbing though is you would think, his whole cannibal act would kind of quiet down. No, he would actually torment one of the guards. There was this guard who was kind of a short and stout fellow, and every time he came in to check on Swift Runner would kind of eye him up and down, and he would hold up three fingers, and he would tell the guard, "You have this much fat on your bones. You'd be good eating."
That would be creepy.
Yeah, he would threaten to eat one of the guards. Historically, Swift Runner is the first hanging at Fort Saskatchewan in Canada.
Are there stories of Wendigo outside of that region?
Not too many. Most of them usually tend to congregate in the Canada provinces. But then you had Jack Fiddler too. He was a Wendigo killer.
A Wendigo killer, like a Wendigo hunter? Yeah,
he would be the one that the Algonquins would call upon when they suspected somebody was a Wendigo, and he would come and perform their version of an exorcism on the poor Wendigo victim. He's allegedly killed 14 different Wendigo.
Wow. Have you had any experiences with what you would consider native paranormal type stuff? I know that's extremely vague. I'm trying to think of, like you have stories of like little people and things like that. And since you have like kind of gone down these different paths of researching this stuff, that does, as you stated, sometimes drudge things up. And I was just curious if you've ever experienced anything firsthand that you believe was directly related to some of that stuff.
I actually encountered what I think might have been a puckwudgie.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually hiking with my dog, Duke, because I always take him out. He's kind of like my first alarm, okay? Because I feel like animals can sense things long before humans can. So I always take Duke with me. And we were, hiking one day, and we kept hearing this really weird, high-pitched whistle But this whistle wasn't just like a straight whistle. It was like a trilling whistle. You know how those school whistles sounded, how they had that little like kind of sound?
Yeah, for sure.
It sounded like that. And I'm looking around and there's nobody else in my vicinity, Matt. There's nobody there. And Duke's just kind of, looking around like, what is that? And we just keep walking, and this whistle keeps growing louder and louder and louder. And I look at Duke upon the third time I hear this whistle, and he looks nervous, okay? And when Duke gets nervous, that's when I get nervous, and I'm kind of like, okay, what's going on here? I'm trying to ascertain what it could be that's around, and I look at this hill, this embankment that's going up, and I see this little person that's maybe about a foot and a half, 2 feet tall. And he looks so weird, Matt. Like he had this big, big nose. And he had long strands of hair on top of his head. It was like a darkish, brownish, maybe black hair. He had a long chin, and he was wearing what looked like rabbit and squirrel pelts as his clothing. And he's holding this long stick that looks like a spear. He's staring right at me, just kind of like, looking at me like, what's up, player? What is even bothering him? And he just kind of stares at me for a minute. He whistles at me real quick and just takes on up the hill. He runs up the hill, and that was it. I was like, what was this? So I think that was a pukwudgie.
Was that in Arizona?
Yeah.
And I assume the same whistle you had heard before.
Yeah, it was the same exact whistle. So I knew that whistle came from him. And I think the reason why he didn't do anything unusual, really, I mean, kind of weird to say he didn't do anything unusual. He's unusual. But he just kind of stared at me, I think because I showed him the proper respect. Mm-hmm. I didn't let Duke take off after him. I didn't even try to chase after him. I just kind of stood there looking at him like, oh, what are you? So
I too have had a encounter with something I would consider in that family of beings. Here we call them little people. Mine actually did take place right in the middle of the city.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was kind of a weird situation. It was actually the first house I moved into whenever I moved out. Couldn't afford very much. I was in the hood. And whenever I moved into that house, there was this older Cherokee woman that lived in the house behind mine. And directly behind our houses was a chain link fence with a gate that separated the two properties. And so whenever I was moving in, she came over and knocked on the back door, which, surprised me. And I went and answered it and started talking to her. Mm-hmm. She was very nice, and lots of paranormal stuff went on in that house. She told me the story behind the house and everything, which I won't get into now. But she had told me that she had smoked the house whenever she heard that somebody was moving into it. And then she starts to leave, and she stops, and she says, "Oh, by the way, there's little people here."
Wow.
This was something I had heard before, but it certainly caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting, Yeah,
no, I mean, that's not really a common conversation.
And honestly, whenever she said it, considering, I'm in the hood in the middle of the city, I was kind of like, okay, maybe I need to second guess this sweet little old lady. Well, she was like, yeah, I feed them,
Oh, okay.
It's fine. Everything's okay. She assured me that they were harmless and not to worry about them.
Okay.
Late one night, I'm sitting on my front porch. And I don't have the light on or anything. I might have been smoking a cigarette at the time or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this thing kind of like standing there at the corner of my porch. I can kind of see it out, the corner of my eye. And as I turn my head, it runs around the end of the porch.
Oh, wow.
There's bushes right there. And then there's like a gap at the end of my porch where I can see between the bush and the corner of the house. So I'm looking at that gap. And at first I thought it was a cat, maybe like sitting there.
Right.
And then it takes off running, and I'm looking, and as it runs by the end of my porch, which the end of my porch, the porch itself was probably, it wasn't very tall, maybe a foot off the ground. Mm-hmm. This thing was probably 8 inches to a foot taller than my porch.
Okay, yeah, so about the same size as what I saw then.
Yeah. And I mean, it just looked like kind of like a little person with, long dark hair
Mm-hmm.
and kind of, I don't know, animal skins, leatherish looking clothing. And it, I just saw it for a second. Yeah, I just saw it for a second as it ran across, by the end of my porch.
I have a theory as to why it was staring at you, though.
Why is that?
You were smoking a cigarette. Tobacco. Tobacco is very important in Native American culture.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought
of that. In fact, people have told me if you go, to investigate Bigfoot and you want to see a Bigfoot, bring it tobacco.
Yeah.
So tobacco is a sacred plant in Native American culture. I think that's why it was staring at you for a minute, because it could smell the tobacco.
Yeah, it wasn't uncommon for us back in the day to leave offerings of tobacco whenever we would go out in the woods and go into different areas and things like that.
Smart idea.
So that kind of makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know, she may have been out there feeding it or something at the time. I don't know. I didn't really,
It's possible.
Being the white guy in the hood, I was like, I'm going back inside now. This is a lot.
It's like, I look weird, but this is a little too weird for me. I'm going back inside.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're tired from your big convention trip.
Yeah, I really got to get used to speaking in front of large crowds, Matt. It's a different thing. When you're doing a live show on a podcast, you don't see the audience. You see their names, you see the room. But when you do a conference, you step up and you see 200 people looking at you. You're like, oh, good grief.
Well, as long as you enjoy it and have a good time,
Oh, I love this thing, Matt. I love doing cryptozoology. I love my skinwalker talks, my Wendigo talks. I love interacting with the people. The people, the audience, they really make it all worthwhile, man.
Do you have any conventions coming up that you're going to be speaking at?
Not yet. Not that I know of. So, I mean, that could change right after we hang up or whatever. You never know. If it happens, I'll let you know.
If somebody wants to make it happen, how can they reach you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook under Ryan Paul Tremblay. You can find me on Twitter, or is it X nowadays? Twitter, X, all the same thing. You can find me on Instagram. If you want to, just add me up or whatever, you can message me whenever you want. I love conversation. I love interactions. I'm constantly posting articles. So, like I said, interact, hit me up, and I'm a friendly guy. I don't bite, not too hard anyway.
What's your favorite movie monster?
Oh, Godzilla.
It's a good time to be a Godzilla fan.
It always is a good time to be a Godzilla fan, Matt. I mean, I know everybody's all excited because of the new King Kong and Godzilla movie coming out, but Godzilla -1, oh my God. Oh,
I haven't seen it yet, and everybody says it's so wonderful.
Oh, it is, and plus you can watch it in black and white, dude. Black and white. It was so good in black and white. It gave me such nostalgic goosebumps.
Yeah, I gotta see it.
Oh, it's a beautiful movie. I know that's a weird way to describe a Godzilla movie, but it was beautiful. I'm not gonna lie.
It was nice to see it win some awards.
Oh yeah, Godzilla finally got the Oscar, man. He did it after 70 years. He finally got one.
Can't beat practical effects, man.
No, you cannot. I will agree with you on that.
Ryan, thanks for joining me. I've had a blast. I look forward to future conversations with you, sir.
Yes, let's do this again soon, dude.
Absolutely. And if you've had an encounter with something you can't explain, Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, puckwudgies, anything at all, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to past episodes, social media, merchandise, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.